Something is happening behind the scenes of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage, and if the latest insider claims are true, then everything the public thought it knew about this relationship could be completely wrong. For years, people were told they were watching one of the greatest royal love stories ever. A prince who had spent much of his life searching for happiness finally found the woman of his dreams. Together, they stood against the world, walked away from royal life, and built a new future on their own terms. That was the story. But what if it wasn't the truth? What if the real story was hidden from the very beginning? Because a shocking new insider account is making one explosive allegation that has royal watchers absolutely stunned. The claim is not that the marriage is struggling. The claim is not that Harry made mistakes. The claim is that Meghan allegedly knew exactly what she was doing from day one. And if that's true, then some of the biggest moments in royal history suddenly look very different. The rushed engagement. The warnings from Harry's closest friends. The concerns raised by members of the royal family. The sudden move to California. The bombshell interviews. The endless public attacks. What if none of these events were random? What if they were all part of something much bigger? Because according to sources now speaking out, there were people around Harry who tried desperately to slow him down. People who warned him. People who questioned what was happening. People who allegedly saw things that Harry could not see himself. But every warning was ignored. Every concern was dismissed. And every person who stood in the way reportedly found themselves pushed further and further out of Harry's life. Now, years later, those same warnings are returning to haunt the entire royal story. Because insiders believe a pattern is finally becoming impossible to ignore. A pattern that raises one chilling question. Was Prince Harry living a love story? Or was he being carefully led toward a future that someone else had planned all along? The answer may explain everything. And what one insider claims happened behind closed doors is so shocking that it could change the way people view this marriage forever. Long before the explosive interviews, long before the royal exit, and long before the endless headlines that divided public opinion across the world, there were already people inside Harry's circle who were quietly worried. At the time, almost nobody paid attention. After all, Harry looked happier than he had in years. The relationship was moving at lightning speed. Every public appearance seemed to generate massive excitement. The media could not stop talking about them. And millions of people believed they were watching the beginning of a modern royal fairy tale. But behind the scenes, according to royal insiders, the mood was very different. Because several people closest to Harry allegedly shared the same concern. Everything was happening too fast. Far too fast. Friends who had known Harry for years reportedly urged him to slow down. Family members allegedly suggested waiting before making life-changing decisions. Even individuals who rarely involved themselves in Harry's personal affairs were said to be quietly questioning the speed of the relationship. Yet none of it mattered. The more concerns people raised, the more determined Harry appeared to become. And that is where this story starts becoming truly fascinating. Because according to insiders, Harry was not simply in love. He was desperate for something he had wanted his entire life. A family of his own. People often forget what Harry's life looked like before Meghan entered the picture. Yes, he was one of the most famous men on earth. Yes, he was a prince. Yes, he lived a life most people could only dream about. But many royal commentators have repeatedly described him as deeply lonely. The loss of his mother had left scars that never fully healed. Watching his older brother build a stable family only intensified his desire to find the same thing for himself. He wanted a partner. He wanted children. He wanted the kind of family life he felt had always been missing. And according to the insiders now speaking out, that desire may have made him vulnerable. Because when Meghan entered his life, she appeared to be everything he had been searching for. She understood him. She supported him. She shared his frustrations. She shared his dreams. At least, that's what Harry reportedly believed. The connection seemed almost perfect. Too perfect, some critics now claim. Because one of the most controversial allegations emerging from royal circles today is that Meghan allegedly mirrored Harry's biggest hopes and ambitions. If Harry wanted privacy, she wanted privacy. If Harry wanted a different future, she wanted a different future. If Harry dreamed about leaving certain aspects of royal life behind, She appeared to feel exactly the same way. And nowhere was that more obvious than Harry's well-known dream of spending significant time in Africa. For years, Harry had spoken passionately about Africa. It was a place where he felt free. A place where he felt connected to his mother's legacy. A place where he believed he could escape constant public attention. According to several reports, discussions about a future there became a serious part of their relationship. The idea was not treated like a fantasy. It was discussed as a genuine possibility. A real future. A real destination. A real life they could build together. And according to insiders, Meghan appeared fully committed to that vision. She reportedly embraced the conversations, supported the plans, and encouraged Harry to believe they wanted the same future. But this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Because the insiders making these allegations now claim something very different was happening behind the scenes. They claim that while Harry believed one future was being planned, another future may already have been taking shape. A future thousands of miles away. A future centered not on Africa, but on California. And if those claims are true, then one of the biggest assumptions about this relationship may have been wrong from the very beginning. Because the deeper investigators look into the timeline, the more they believe the pieces may have been falling into place long before anyone realized. And what happened next would only make those suspicions even stronger. This is where the story stops looking like a simple royal romance and starts looking like something much more complicated. Because according to the insiders now speaking out, the biggest question is no longer whether Harry and Meghan loved each other. The question is whether they were ever working toward the same destination. And that question becomes impossible to ignore when you look at what allegedly happened next. According to multiple royal commentators, Harry genuinely believed his future would look very different from the life he is living today. Long before California became the center of the Sussex brand, Harry was reportedly focused on a completely different vision. A quieter life. Less media attention. More charity work. More time in Africa. More distance from the pressures that came with being a senior royal. It was a dream he had spoken about for years. But according to explosive insider claims, while Harry was focused on one future, Meghan may have been focused on another. And that is where the first major twist enters the story. Because several royal reporters have claimed that conversations about California were happening far earlier than the public realized. Far earlier. According to these reports, discussions about life in America allegedly existed even during the early stages of the relationship. At the time, nobody thought much about it. Why would they? People talk about different places all the time. But looking back, critics now believe those conversations may have revealed far more than anyone understood. Because years later, when Harry and Meghan left royal life and settled in California, some observers began connecting dots that had once seemed unrelated. And the pattern they believe they found is raising serious questions. Questions Harry himself may eventually have to answer. Then came another moment that royal watchers still talk about today. The engagement. Looking back, many people remember the excitement, the interviews, the celebrations, the global attention. But insiders claim there was another side to the story. A side that rarely made headlines. Because according to reports, several people close to Harry were privately expressing concern. Not because they disliked Meghan. Not because they opposed the relationship. But because everything seemed to be moving at extraordinary speed. One royal commentator later described it as a train moving so fast that nobody could slow it down. And according to the allegations now resurfacing, anyone who tried to hit the brakes found themselves pushed out of the conversation. Friends became distant. Relationships reportedly became strained. And voices that once mattered carried less and less influence. For critics of Meghan, this is one of the biggest red flags. Because they argue that Harry gradually became isolated from the people who knew him best. But then came the twist that turned concern into suspicion. The Oprah connection. At the time, Oprah Winfrey's appearance at the royal wedding attracted attention. People noticed it. People talked about it. But most assumed it was simply another celebrity guest attending a historic event. Nothing more. Nothing less. Years later, that assumption would be challenged. Because after the bombshell Oprah interview shocked the world, Some royal insiders began asking a question that refuses to go away. Why was Oprah there in the first place? And according to the claims now gaining attention, the answer may be far more significant than anyone realized. One insider alleges that the seeds of that famous interview may have been planted years before it actually happened. Think about that for a moment. If true, it changes everything. Because suddenly the interview is no longer a spontaneous response to royal life. It becomes part of a much larger timeline. A timeline that critics claim points toward planning rather than reaction. And once that possibility enters the conversation, every major event begins looking different. The royal wedding, the move away from royal duties, the California relocation, the public interviews, the media deals. Everything starts connecting together, like pieces of a puzzle. A puzzle that many people now believe was hidden in plain sight. But just when royal watchers thought they understood the picture, another explosive claim surfaced. A claim that may be the most damaging of all. Because according to a source close to the situation, Harry may finally be starting to look back at the timeline himself. And if that source is right, then the questions being asked by royal commentators are no longer being asked only by outsiders. They may also be starting to emerge inside Harry's own mind. And if that's true, the biggest conflict may not be between Harry and the royal family. It may be much closer to home. Just when royal watchers thought the story could not get any more explosive, a new wave of insider claims began spreading through royal circles. And this is where the narrative takes a dramatic turn. Because the discussion is no longer focused on what happened years ago. The focus is now on what Harry may be thinking today. According to several royal commentators, something appears to have changed. Not publicly, not officially, but quietly, subtly, behind the scenes. For years, Harry appeared completely aligned with Meghan. Every major decision seemed united. Every public statement pointed in the same direction. Every interview reinforced the same message. The royal family had failed them. The institution had let them down. And leaving was the only option. At least, that was the public image. But now, insiders are beginning to suggest that the situation may no longer be so simple. Because according to reports, Harry's recent actions have sparked intense speculation among royal observers. His repeated interest in returning to Britain. His desire to reconnect with old friends. His reported efforts to rebuild damaged relationships. And his increasing focus on projects connected to his former life have all raised eyebrows. Why? Because critics believe these are not the actions of someone completely satisfied with the path he chose. They are the actions of someone looking backward. Someone reflecting. Someone asking difficult questions. And according to one particularly explosive insider allegation, those questions may eventually lead Harry to revisit the very beginning of his relationship. That possibility alone has sent social media into a frenzy. Because if Harry starts reassessing the timeline, then every major decision suddenly comes under scrutiny. The engagement, the wedding, the royal exit, the interviews, the business deals, everything. And that is where the shocking reveal emerges. According to royal commentators, the biggest issue may not be what happened. The biggest issue may be why it happened. Because the theory now gaining momentum is that Harry and Meghan may have entered the marriage with completely different long-term goals. Harry allegedly wanted peace. Meghan allegedly wanted opportunity. Harry allegedly wanted privacy. Meghan allegedly wanted influence. Harry allegedly wanted escape. Meghan allegedly wanted expansion. Now, to be clear, these are claims and theories being discussed by commentators, not proven facts. But the reason they are attracting attention is because many observers believe the timeline appears to support them. And once people begin looking at events through that lens, the entire story changes. Then came another development that poured gasoline on the fire. Social media. Over the past several months, royal discussion forums, YouTube channels, and online commentators have become obsessed with one question. What if the royal family's early concerns were not about Meghan personally? What if they were about the speed of the relationship itself? Suddenly, old interviews were being re-examined. Old reports were being shared again. Old warnings were being discussed as if they had happened yesterday. The internet became a giant investigation, and the conclusions being reached were startling. Thousands of users began posting the same theory, that Harry may have confused being understood with being strategically managed. That is a brutal accusation. And it is exactly why this story continues generating so much attention. Because if true, it would mean one of the most famous relationships in the world was built on a misunderstanding that nobody recognized until it was far too late. But the biggest shock was still coming. According to an insider whose comments have been spreading rapidly online, there is growing belief among some royal observers that Harry may already be aware of certain concerns. Not all of them. Not fully. But enough to create tension. Enough to create doubt. Enough to create questions. And once questions enter a relationship, they rarely disappear on their own. They grow. They multiply. They demand answers. That is why many royal watchers believe the next chapter of this story could be the most dramatic yet. Because if Harry is genuinely reassessing the past, then the future becomes completely unpredictable. And what happens next could force both Harry and Meghan to confront questions neither of them can avoid forever. Questions about trust. Questions about intentions. And questions about whether the story they built together can survive the weight of everything now being said behind closed doors. But if you think that's where this story reaches its peak, the public reaction that followed was even more explosive. The moment these insider claims started spreading, the internet exploded. And when I say exploded, I mean completely exploded. Within hours, royal discussion forums were flooded with thousands of comments. YouTube channels dedicated entire episodes to the allegations. Royal commentators began debating the claims from every possible angle. And social media turned into a battlefield. Because suddenly, everyone had an opinion. One side argued that the warnings had been there from the very beginning. The other side insisted this was simply another coordinated attempt to rewrite history. There was no middle ground. The debate became fierce almost instantly. On one platform, users began sharing old clips of Prince William urging Harry to slow down. On another, people were posting screenshots of reports discussing Harry's dream of living in Africa years before California ever entered the picture. Every old interview was being re-examined. Every public appearance was being analyzed. Every detail was being placed under a microscope. And the more people looked, the more divided the conversation became. One viral post gained millions of views after asking a simple but devastating question. If California was always the destination, then why was South Africa presented as the dream? That question alone triggered thousands of responses. Some users claimed it proved everything. Others called it ridiculous speculation. But one thing was clear. People could not stop talking about it. Then came another wave of reactions. Several royal commentators who had remained neutral for years suddenly started speaking more openly. One commentator argued that the real issue wasn't whether Meghan had a plan. The real issue was whether Harry understood the plan. Another claimed the entire relationship now looked different when viewed through the timeline being discussed by insiders. Again, these were opinions. But they were opinions reaching millions of people. And that made them impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, supporters of Meghan fought back aggressively. They accused critics of unfairly targeting her. They argued that successful women are often portrayed as manipulative when they make ambitious decisions. They insisted there was no evidence proving any long-term strategy existed. The backlash was immediate. The arguments became emotional. The debates became personal. And the divide only grew larger. Then something even more interesting happened. Attention started shifting away from Meghan and toward Harry. Because more and more people began asking the same question. What did Harry know? And when did he know it? That question changed everything. Suddenly, the story was no longer about a former actress entering the royal family. It became a story about a prince who may now be re-evaluating some of the most important decisions of his life. And according to online discussions, that possibility resonated deeply with many people. Why? Because regret is something everyone understands. The idea of looking back and wondering whether you missed warning signs. The idea of questioning decisions you once felt certain about. The idea of realizing that some choices cannot easily be undone. Those emotions connected with audiences in a powerful way. And that's why this story continued dominating headlines. Because underneath all the royal drama, all the headlines, and all the controversy, there was a very human question sitting at the center of everything. What happens when someone starts questioning the story they once believed completely? That question fueled endless speculation. It fueled countless videos. And it fueled one final theory that is now sending shockwaves through royal circles. Because according to some insiders, the biggest revelation may not be in the past. It may be what's about to happen next. And if those insiders are right, then everything we've discussed so far may only be the beginning. Just when the debate online reached its peak, a new layer to the story began circulating that shifted everything again. And this time, it wasn't about old interviews or past decisions. It was about the future. According to several royal commentators and unnamed insiders, there is growing speculation that the real tension in this entire story is no longer just about how things began, but about where things are heading right now. Because behind the headlines, something subtle appears to be changing in Harry's public positioning. Nothing dramatic, nothing officially confirmed, but enough to make royal observers sit up and take notice. Reports of Harry showing increased interest in reconnecting with the UK have resurfaced again and again. Not in a direct way. Not in a formal announcement. But through small signals. Visits being discussed. Projects being linked back to Britain. Old relationships reportedly being revisited. And every one of those signals is now being interpreted through a very different lens. Because once the timeline theory entered the conversation, nothing can be viewed the same way again. And that's where the final twist begins to take shape. According to one particularly controversial insider claim, the most important question is no longer whether Harry regrets anything. The question is whether Harry is beginning to see a version of events that he never fully understood before. A version where the speed of decisions mattered more than the decisions themselves. A version where influence may have been stronger than anyone realized at the time. And a version where the final outcome may not have been fully visible until much later. If that idea is even partially accurate, then it reframes everything. Because it suggests this was never just a royal romance. It was never just a departure from royal life. It was never just a story about media pressure or public attention. It becomes something far more complicated. Something shaped by timing, shaped by emotion, shaped by ambition, and shaped by decisions made under extreme intensity. But here is where things take an even sharper turn. Because according to insiders, there is now a belief among some royal watchers that the next major development will not come from an interview, a statement, or a public appearance. It will come from a moment of absence, or presence. A single appearance that could redefine everything. Because in royal storytelling, silence can be just as powerful as speech. A shared appearance would signal unity. A separate appearance would signal distance. And an unexpected decision to step back from joint public engagement could raise questions that no official statement could easily answer. And that is why attention is now fixed on upcoming royal-related events, appearances, and anniversaries. Every detail is being watched. Every movement is being analyzed. Every absence is being noticed. Because people believe something is building beneath the surface. Something that has not yet been revealed. And if that is true, then the most important part of this entire story has not happened yet. It is still coming. And when it does, it could force a complete rethink of everything people thought they understood about this relationship. Was it a carefully planned path from the beginning? Was it a series of emotional decisions made under pressure? Or is the truth something in between that no one has fully grasped yet? Right now, there are no clear answers. Only theories. Only interpretations. And only growing curiosity. But one thing is certain. The next chapter will not go unnoticed. And when it arrives, it may finally reveal which version of this story comes closest to the truth. So here we are at the end of a story that still feels like it has more questions than answers. A story filled with claims, counterclaims, timelines, emotions, and interpretations that continue to divide opinion across the world. Because whether you believe the insider reports or not, one thing is undeniable. This is one of the most talked about royal relationships in modern history. And every new allegation, every new theory, and every new insider perspective only adds another layer to an already complicated picture. Some people believe this was a carefully unfolding plan from the beginning. Others believe it was simply a relationship that grew under extreme pressure and public attention. And many people are still somewhere in the middle, trying to make sense of everything they've heard so far. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think there is any truth to the idea that Harry may not have seen the full picture from the start? Or do you believe this is just another wave of speculation designed to stir controversy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is far from over. And if you want more deep dives into royal stories, insider claims, and the hidden layers behind global headlines, make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because in stories like this, things can change very quickly. New details can emerge at any time. And the next update could completely shift the way this entire situation is understood. So stay tuned, because the story doesn't end here. It only continues.